Let's talk about how to prevent check fraud. I want to share with you in today's conversation a few preemptive steps that you can take right now, and they're really, really easy, by the way. So let me give you the general considerations first. So how does check fraud happen? Because you got to have a clear idea about the origins of this episode before you can actually fix it. Okay, that situation. So check fraud occurs when scammers illegally alter, forge, or steal checks in order to withdraw money from a bank account. Pretty straightforward, okay? Although it may seem like people rarely write personal checks anymore, check fraud has become a sizable problem in the United States. Just last year, you have less than 100 people that were arrested after they altered stolen checks, deposited them into bank accounts, and then quickly withdrew the money from ATMs. So scammers actually stole about $5 to $50 million in that particular story before the official caught wind of the forgeries. Okay, so it's really important to really understand why the problem that there is a problem, and that while the problem is actually going to go more and more mounting. What do scammers really do with stolen checks? Well, most often, scammers begin the check fraud process by stealing checks out of unlocked residential mailboxes and collection boxes. From there, they can alter information, create counterfeit checks, write checks against closed accounts, and forge endorsements and commit identity theft. So this is totally nefarious, but it is possible. So when we talk about altering information, con artists use household cleaning chemicals to wash off the pen ink from a check while keeping the rest of the check intact. Once the check is dry, they write themselves in as the payee, change the dollar amount, and cash it, a process known as check washing. This is one of the more common types of check fraud, accounting for nearly $1 billion in losses every year. That's really a lot. In terms of creating counterfeit checks, swindlers can use graphic editing software to create altered checks that they can cash themselves or sell on the dark web. Okay, so there's a dark web for that as well. Scammers can also send fake checks to other victims, claiming that recipients have won the lottery or were included in a mystery shopper campaign. As part of the deal, the victim has to cash the checks and wire back a certain amount to cover supposed taxes and processing fees. So when the check bounces, scammers keep whatever money the victim sent them. And you can write checks against closed accounts. In a similar scheme, fraudsters write a prize winner's check from a closed account. Since it takes time for the check to clear, victims don't know that the check is bad until it bounces. By then, they've lost any payments that they have sent to the scammer. And also, in terms of forged endorsements and identity theft commission, scammers can forge your signature and pose as the account holder at the bank, asking for cash instead of making a deposit. They can use the name and address listed on your checks to find other information about you, leading them to full-blown identity theft. With enough personal data, they can open new credit cards, take out loans in your name, and drain money from your other debit accounts. Now, the big question is, how are fake checks used in check deposit scams? The thing is that mail-in check thieves can use fraudulent checks in myriad ways. And so I want to share with you a few of the scams that they orchestrate, hoping you will unknowingly deposit a fake check. So you have overpayment scams. So crooks make offers to buy items on marketplaces like eBay or Craigslist. And to finalize the sale, fraudsters send a check to the seller that exceeds the item's list price, say $2,000 instead of $150. Okay. Suddenly, contrite about the overpayment, the phony buyer then urges the merchant to pay back the excess through a different payment method, such as Venmo or Zelle. And the original check doesn't go through, and the seller can't recover the funds. So this is one way. You also have a fake stimulus checks. So this was really great, especially during COVID and a little bit after COVID. It's not uncommon for the federal government to send relief checks during economic downturns or catastrophic events such as COVID-19 pandemic. So basically, a lot of con men jump on those opportunities, distributing fake checks and asking victims to send a small amount of money back to them via ACH or gift cards. Other grifters steal stimulus checks and use them to carry out related schemes. So this is kind of important. And let me give you an example. Between December 2019 and August 2020, like right at the heart of COVID, a Virginia man stole mail from over 150 people to create counterfeit COVID-19 stimulus checks and commit identity theft. You also have car rob and other get-rich-quick scams. So college students and other people looking to make extra income have lost thousands of dollars to too good to be true car rob and work-from-home scams. So this is an important element to think about. You also have a small business fraud. You have a nanny or caregiver scams. You have remote deposit capture scams. For instance, sweetheart scams are a common entry point for remote deposit scams. Once criminals feel that they have fostered enough trust with the victim, they contrive an elaborate story. And the scammer explains how they are currently overseas without access to a bank and can only send checks. But there is a way the victim can help by providing access to their bank account. And fraudsters then use the bank's mobile app to deposit bad checks into the victim's account. And after the victim transfers the money, the scammer disappears. And with the victim's bank account number, con artists can also go shopping online, launder money, and even conduct tax fraud. So the thing is, you got to be smart, okay? I want to share with you a couple of ways to identify a fake check. While scammers are skilled at devising new ways to commit check fraud nowadays, their schemes can be really porous. Be on the lookout for these telltale signs of check tampering whenever you receive check in the mail. If you have irregular perforations or micro perforations, missing check numbers, incorrect routing code versus the location of the bank, this is a really important element. So when I talk about irregular perforations or micro perforations, checks generated by a legitimate printer have one or more rough edges, but too many or too few perforations may be a sign of a bad check. So if a check looks suspicious, compare the perforations to one of your own blank checks, and also missing check numbers. So people use check numbers to reference their transactions, but banks don't need them to process a check. This means scammers can clear several checks with the same number. So one way to identify fake checks is to compare the 3-digit number in the upper right-hand corner to the last 3 digits in the magnetic ink character recognition MICR line on the bottom of the check. If they don't tally, the check is likely fake. You also have to think about incorrect routing code versus the location of the bank. The good thing is that in this country, there is a routing number at the bottom of every check, and the first 2 digits are a Federal Reserve District code that represent the bank's location. And there should also be a fraction in the upper right corner of each check. And the first 2 digits represent a city-state prefix. The next 3 are a financial institution identifier, and the final 3 are the Federal Reserve routing code. So the first 3 digits after the 0 in the routing number should be the same as the last 3 digits of the check routing symbol. So this is an important element to really think about, especially when you are evaluating a check. And that's going to help you actually prevent some issues down the road. Next, you have an odd MICR line. So you want to run your fingers along the bottom of the check where the routing and account numbers are typically located, right? And these characters should not be raised or have any reflectivity or shine to them. And try dampening your finger or running, and let's say running it over the strip. The numbers on a fake check may change color. So if you see a change in color here, you know this is a fake check. You also have to pay attention to notations in the memo area. So sometimes scammers they like to list words like dividends or payroll in check memos, but real businesses have accounting functions dedicated to processing checks and don't need such citations really. You also have to think about the stains or discolorations on the check. So when done too quickly, check washing, that's what I spoke about a little earlier, may create watermarks or actually cause text to rub off when you touch it. So fraudsters frequently print fake checks or on shiny, poor quality paper, making ink even more likely to smear, right? So you want to really look for those telltale signs of check fraud. And another thing I want to share with you in terms of being very strategic, 7 ways to identify a fake check is actually to look at other discrepancies. Now, we can't really give you an exhaustive list of discrepancies to actually help you spot a fake check, but those 7 telltale signs should give you an indication. So, missing paper and payee names, addresses, and MICR numbers can be evidence of tampering. Words such as non-negotiable or void written across a check are suspicious, as are strange-looking signatures and varying fonts. So if you have varying fonts, you know there's a problem. Okay, so those are elements to really pay attention to make sure that you are actually spotting check fraud, or just spotting something just regular here. So be strategic here. Okay, how do you prevent check fraud in the first place? I mean, you got to have a strategy in place to prevent check fraud, to make sure it never happens in the first place. You want to safeguard your mail. You want to use your online banking features, and you want to shred sensitive documents. And you have to do this routinely. So when I talk about safeguarding your mail, the thing is that residential mailboxes are fertile grounds for scammers. Do not leave your mail unattended. Send checks via a post office collection box when at work, or hand them directly to your carrier. If you are expecting a check but may be out of town when it arrives, you want to put a hold on your mail or remote it to a different address. Note that you will need to create a USPS.com account and create multiple forms of present multiple forms of identification to complete the process. And you can also use your online banking features. That's really the best way to prevent check fraud. Whenever possible, eliminate the use of paper checks altogether. Consider paying recurring bills online and opt for paperless statements. Pay attention to any overdue notices and reconcile your records every 30 days. That way you have a clear idea that things are really working properly for you. And so you may find that some checks haven't cleared or notice other abnormal activity on your account. Ask your bank about positive pay or reverse positive pay services, and these options deter check fraud by matching the check information that companies provide with the checks that banks receive in the first place. And you also want to shred sensitive documents. So always shred unused or canceled checks, pre-approved credit notices, and bank statements before discarding them. Scammers can steal this out of the trash, because you never know who's really looking into your trash in the first place, right? So make it a point to examine your check supply regularly and report any missing checks to your bank. And never write checks payable to cash or bearer, since anyone can take that money. And don't endorse checks until you are ready to deposit them via your phone or, let's say, at the bank. You want to use indelible black gel ink pens, okay? The Better Business Bureau urges consumers to sign their checks with long-lasting indelible black gel ink. And this ink actually is particularly tough to scrub off, making it nearly impossible for scammers to create the original contents of the check, to actually erase those contents. You should also avoid using counter checks. So these are magnetically encoded with your account number, but require you to write out your company and payee information by hand. So for scammers, counter checks are free money. They can write in whatever they want, and you do not want that anyway. Do not accept overpayments. So receiving a check in the mail for an item more than your asking price usually turns out to be some form of bank scam. So do not deposit these checks from unknown senders, or checks associated with out-of-town banks. Remember to scrutinize the check date, sender name, and financial institution for errors or dubious characteristics. You also want to opt for checks with one or more security features. I mean, the more security features that you have in a check, the better. That's what you want in the first place, okay? And so some banks offer check fraud protection features such as special ink, check paper, and micro reporting. And that's really good. For example, not micro reporting, micro printing. Intuit, for example, issues checks with the premium grade security paper that's not available for sale anywhere else. And other check manufacturers may embed security features that are challenging for scammers to replicate. So you want to use a bank that can provide checks with at least one of the following features. Let's say a mixture of visible and invisible fibers, a 3D reflective holo stripe, high resolution microprinting, watermarks that cannot easily be copied, right? And also chemical voids. So chemical voids are really important because they really add an extra layer of robustness, if you will, to the security features of your checks. So that's really cool. It's important though, when we talk about how to prevent check fraud, if for any reason it didn't like you're not able to stop it, as soon as you actually spot check fraud, you want to report it as soon as possible, because a bank is obligated to compensate customers for fraudulent checks unless it determines that the customer's action significantly contributed to the forgery. So if you premeditated the act, you're not going to actually be compensated. So, but you can increase your chances of recovery by filing a police report and calling your bank's fraud prevention or fraud operations hotline. As long as you involved law enforcement in the process, you are safe, because you can always go back to the bank and say, you know what, I informed the authorities. Be prepared to sign an affidavit certifying that you did not authorize the check. And you should also notify a few other organizations to help law enforcement apprehend the scammer, because that's the thing, right? You want them to stop the con man from acting further. So if you are the victim of stolen checks, you want to file a case with the U.S. Postal Service, Postal Inspection Service. For fixed checks, you want to report them to the Federal Trade Commission, FTC, and this happens at identitytheft.gov. And if you were the victim of phishing as part of check fraud, forward emails and texts to reportingfish@apwg.org or spam7726. You can just send a text message respectively. Okay, so email and text. It's important to understand that statistics show that if someone was a victim of fraud once, they are nearly 50% likely to become a repeat victim. So the same applies for check deposit scams. Scammers often target the same individuals multiple times. So that means what? It means that you might want to think about having a permanent solution to really sort of prevent check fraud, right? So you are able to have a fraud protection by having an identity theft service, for instance, that allows you, for instance, to receive near instant fraud and identity theft alerts, 24/7 US-based fraud resolution support, and up to $1 million in identity theft insurance coverage when you sign up. So this is really important for you to really see where the best offer it really is. So in closing, in today's conversation, I spoke to you about how to prevent check fraud. I gave you the general considerations. I explained to you how to be smart when it comes to identifying a fake check and also being strategic. Thank you so much. God bless you. I'll see you next time. Until then, remember, stay marvelous.